Radio Shack. Walk into a Radio Shack in 1985, and you were stepping into a very specific kind of paradise. If, that is, you are the kind of person who got excited about resistors. Radio Shack was the DIY technology heaven of the pre-internet era. The store that had every obscure component you needed for every project nobody else understood. Need a specific transistor? A particular gauge of wire? A connector that existed in no other retail environment on Earth? Radio Shack had it, somewhere in those little plastic drawers behind the counter, organized by a system only the staff fully understood. But Radio Shack wasn't just for engineers. It brought computing to the American masses with the TRS-80 in 1977, one of the first mass-market personal computers, affectionately nicknamed the Trash 80 by its critics and beloved by its users. Before the Apple II was in every school, the TRS-80 was putting computing in American living rooms. The decline was slow and then sudden, as technology became more integrated, as the components Radio Shack sold became sealed. Inside devices you bought whole and threw away when they broke. The store's reason for existing eroded. They tried selling phones. They tried selling DirecTV subscriptions. They never found a second identity that worked. Bankruptcy in 2015. A few hundred stores lingered afterward under various ownership arrangements. The original Radio Shack, the one with the drawers full of components and the staff who could actually answer your questions, was already long gone by then. Blockbuster Video Friday night. You pile into the car. You go to Blockbuster. That was the ritual for millions of American families through the 1980s and 90s, and it was a genuinely good ritual. The blue and yellow sign, the smell of the place, plastic cases and faintly stale popcorn, the walk down the aisles, reading the backs of boxes, arguing about what to get, the specific disappointment of finding that the movie you wanted was already rented out. The specific joy of finding it was in. At its peak, Blockbuster had 9,000 stores across America. 9,000. It was one of the most recognizable retail brands in the country, and it seemed permanent in the way that only truly dominant things seem permanent, right up until it wasn't. The story everyone tells is the Netflix meeting in 2000, when Netflix offered to sell itself to Blockbuster for $50 million and Blockbuster passed. Netflix was losing money at the time. The offer seemed reasonable to decline. In retrospect, it was the most expensive pass in retail history. Netflix is currently worth somewhere north of $300 billion. But the deeper problem was the late fees. Americans genuinely hated Blockbuster's late fee policy, with an intensity that's hard to overstate. It felt punitive and arbitrary and wrong in a way that customers remembered. When streaming arrived and offered the same movies with no late fees, no driving, and no empty shelves, the decision was easy. Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy in 2010. One store remains in Bend, Oregon, operating as a tourist destination and a monument to a Friday night ritual that an entire generation will never forget. Abraham and Straus, A&S. Not every lost store is mourned by the whole country. Some are mourned fiercely by the people who grew up near them, and Abraham and Straus is that store for a generation of New Yorkers. Founded in Brooklyn in 1865, A&S was a genuine institution. A full-service luxury department store with roots deep enough to predate the Brooklyn Bridge. For well over a century, it was where New York families bought their good clothes, their fine jewelry, their special occasion everything. It was a social venue as much as a retail destination. The Fulton Street flagship store in downtown Brooklyn was the anchor of that neighborhood's commercial identity for generations. Going to A&S meant something. It had the weight that only very old, very beloved institutions carry. The corporate story ended it. A&S was acquired by Federated Department Stores, the parent company of Macy's. And in 1995, after a period of gradual consolidation, the A&S name was retired. The stores became Macy's. The merchandise was largely the same. The name was gone. For the New Yorkers who grew up with it, that distinction matters enormously. Macy's is Macy's. A&S was something else, something specific and irreplaceable, and theirs. The building is still there. The name is not. Toys R. U.S. Jeffrey the Giraffe welcomed you at the door. The sign was in that backward R that every kid understood immediately, and inside was the closest thing to a toy museum that American retail ever produced. Toys R Us was not just a store. It was a destination, a place parents took children as a treat, a place children thought about for weeks before going, a place that turned the ordinary act of buying a toy into an event. The sheer volume of merchandise was part of the magic. Every aisle was floor-to-ceiling product, organized by category, overwhelming in the best possible way. In the 1980s, Toys R Us was ground zero for every holiday craze. Cabbage Patch Kids, Transformers, Nintendo. If something was the must-have toy of the season, the Toys R Us parking lot is where parents lined up at dawn to find it. The end was not a market failure. The product was beloved. The failure was financial. A leveraged buyout in 2005 loaded the company with so much debt that it couldn't invest in its stores or compete effectively with the pricing of Walmart and Amazon. The company that debt financed the buyout made money. Toys R Us went bankrupt in 2017 and liquidated in 2018. A small comeback attempt has launched a handful of new locations in recent years. Whether Geoffrey the Giraffe gets a real second act remains to be seen. Babbage's. Most people don't know the name Babbage's. Most people use what Babbage's became every time they trade in a game they're done with. Founded in 1984 in Dallas, Babbage's started as a PC software retailer, selling programs on floppy disks at a time when software store was a new concept and the products themselves felt like the future. As the console gaming market exploded in the late 1980s and 90s, Babbage's shifted with it, becoming one of the primary destinations for console games and accessories. In 1999, Babbage's merged with another software retailer called Software Etc. under the parent company Barnes & Noble, yes, the bookstore, and the combined entity eventually rebranded. That rebrand became GameStop. So Babbage's didn't exactly die. It transformed. The original name disappeared, but the stores, the model, and the used game trade-in culture it pioneered all survived into a chain that has itself become a cultural phenomenon, beloved, mocked, shorted by hedge funds, and defended by Reddit in equal measure. F.W. Woolworth Company. Before Walmart, before Target, before the entire concept of the discount mass market retailer existed in its modern form, there was Woolworths, and Woolworths invented almost everything those stores take for granted. Frank Winfield Woolworth opened his first store in 1879 with a radical concept: fixed low prices on everyday merchandise, clearly marked, no haggling. The 5 and dime, everything for a nickel or a dime, was genuinely revolutionary at a time when retail prices were negotiated individually at the counter. By the mid-20th century, Woolworth's lunch counters were as famous as the merchandise. They were where working Americans ate affordable meals downtown, where teenagers spent Saturday afternoons, where communities gathered. They were also, in 1960, the site of the Greensboro sit-ins, when 4 black college students sat at a segregated Woolworth's lunch counter in North Carolina and refused to leave. The civil rights significance of those lunch counters cannot be separated from the history of the store. Woolworths couldn't compete with Walmart's scale and supply chain efficiency. It closed its variety stores in 1997, converting its remaining retail operations into what became Foot Locker. The lunch counters closed. The 5 and dime was done. Circuit City. The giant red plug at the entrance was the landmark. You saw it from the parking lot, and you knew exactly where you were. Circuit City built the template for the American Electronics Superstore, a single massive retail floor where you could buy a television, a stereo system, a car radio, and a household appliance all in one trip. The salespeople worked on commission, which meant they were knowledgeable, attentive, and sometimes, depending on the day, a little intense. At its peak, Circuit City was genuinely competing with Best Buy for dominance of the electronics retail market, and the competition was close enough that the outcome wasn't obvious. The 2008 financial crisis tipped the balance decisively. Consumers stopped buying big-ticket electronics. Circuit City's margins, already thin, couldn't survive the downturn. In a decision that became a business school case study in what not to do, Circuit City laid off 3,400 of its highest-paid hourly employees in 2007 to cut costs, eliminating its most experienced salespeople at the moment when knowledgeable service was its primary competitive advantage over online retailers. The logic was financial. The consequences were fatal. Liquidation in 2009. Best Buy won by default. The red plug signs went dark. Hollywood Video Blockbuster got the fame. Hollywood Video got the inventory. While Blockbuster focused on new releases and kept quantities of popular titles high, Hollywood Video built its reputation on depth. Stores that stocked up to 16,000 titles, including older films, foreign cinema, and catalog titles that Blockbuster didn't bother with. If you wanted something obscure, Hollywood Video was often your better bet. The stores also had a different aesthetic, brighter, more open, with a slightly more upscale feel than the blue and yellow Blockbuster environment. Hollywood Video cultivated a sense that it took movies more seriously, which attracted a customer base that appreciated the distinction. None of it mattered when streaming arrived. The same forces that dismantled Blockbuster dismantled Hollywood Video. The combination of Netflix convenience, Redbox price point, and the complete elimination of late fees as a concept. Hollywood Video liquidated in 2010, 1 year after filing for bankruptcy. The 16,000 title inventory that had been its competitive advantage had no value in a world where the entire history of cinema was available on a laptop. Sam Goody. Goody got it, the slogan that anyone who spent time in an American mall between 1970 and 2000 has somewhere in their memory. Sam Goody was the heart of mall music culture for 3 decades. The store where you browsed vinyl, then cassettes, then CDs, flipping through the racks with no particular destination, letting the covers and the track listings pull you in directions you hadn't planned. It was one of the primary ways Americans discovered new music before algorithms existed to do it for them. Sam Goody was actually a real person. Samuel Gudowitz, a New York record dealer who opened his first store in the 1950s and pioneered the discount mail-order LP business. The chain expanded nationally and became a mall fixture. The digital revolution didn't sneak up on Sam Goody. It came fast and with finality. Napster arrived in 1999. iTunes arrived in 2003. The CD, which had been the most profitable music format in history, became a product people stopped buying almost overnight. No, by 2006, Sam Goody's mall presence had largely collapsed. The stores that remained were converted to other formats. The browsing experience, the specific pleasure of flipping through physical music, was gone. Peaches Records and Tapes, where Sam Goody was the mall music store. Peaches Records and Tapes was the street-level alternative. Bigger, louder, more colorful, and significantly more committed to the idea that a record store should feel like an event. The signature was unmistakable. Giant wooden peach crates used as record bins and massive album art murals painted directly on the exterior walls of the buildings. A Peaches location announced itself from the street. You couldn't drive past one without knowing it was there. Founded in 1975 in Atlanta, Peaches expanded across the South and into other markets through the late 70s and 80s. The stores were large, warehouse scale in some locations, and the inventory was deep. Peaches was where serious music buyers went when they wanted selection rather than just the top 40. The same forces that ended Sam Goody ended Peaches. Market saturation through the 80s, followed by the collapse of physical media in the digital era. The murals came down. The peach crates were cleared out. The buildings became other things. The aesthetic was specific enough that photographs of old Peaches locations still circulate online as artifacts of a particular moment in American music retail. KB Toys. If Toys R Us was the toy cathedral, KB Toys was the toy chapel. A smaller, more intimate, crammed into a mall storefront with shelves packed floor to ceiling in a way that felt more like a treasure hunt than a shopping trip. KB Toy and Hobby, the original name, started in 1922 as a candy and novelty store before gradually evolving into a dedicated toy retailer. By the 1970s and 80s, a KB Toys was a mandatory stop on any mall trip, that included a child. The cramped layout that might have felt claustrophobic in another context felt exactly right for a toy store. There was always something new around the next shelf. Always one more thing to find. KB's model was built entirely on mall foot traffic, which made it enormously vulnerable to the same forces that were killing the American mall itself. As department store anchors closed and shoppers migrated to standalone big-box retailers, the foot traffic that fed KB's locations dried up. The company filed for bankruptcy twice, in 2004 and again in 2008, before liquidating its remaining stores in 2009. The mall toy store as a format essentially died with it. KB had been the category. When KB went, the category went with it. Lionel Kitty City. Lionel is one of the most beloved names in American toy history, the model train company whose products have been under Christmas trees since 1900. So when Lionel decided to open a chain of toy superstores in the 1970s to compete directly with Toys R Us, the name carried weight. Kitty City positioned itself as a full-service toy supermarket. Large format, deep inventory, the kind of scale that communicated seriousness. At its peak, it had 150 locations, primarily in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and it was a genuine rival to Toys R Us in its home markets. The early 1980s recession hit hard. Lionel's broader corporate finances were strained, and Kitty City, dependent on discretionary spending from families who were tightening budgets, felt the pressure immediately. The chain contracted through the early 80s and liquidated in 1993, never having fully recovered from the recession that hit during its expansion phase. The Lionel Train Company survived under separate ownership. Kitty City became a footnote, the toy superstore that almost competed with Toys R Us until the economy decided otherwise. Borders Books. Borders was the bookstore where you were supposed to stay. That was the design philosophy. Wide aisles, comfortable browsing, an in-store cafe, seating areas where you could sit and read before deciding to buy. Borders didn't just sell books. It created an environment that made lingering feel welcome. For a specific kind of reader, a Saturday afternoon at Borders was as satisfying as the books themselves. Founded in Ann Arbor, Michigan in 1971 as a used bookstore, Borders expanded into a national chain through the 1980s and 90s, and at its peak, had 1,200 locations across the country. It was one of the two dominant book superstores in America, the other being Barnes & Noble, and the competition between them defined book retail for a generation. The fatal decision came in the early 2000s, when Borders outsourced its entire online sales operation to Amazon. Rather than building its own e-commerce capability, Borders handed that business to the company that would eventually destroy it. By the time Borders recognized the scale of the mistake, Amazon had built an insurmountable lead in online book sales and was expanding into everything else. Borders filed for bankruptcy in 2011 and liquidated all remaining stores. Barnes & Noble survived, barely. The book superstore era, the Saturday afternoons and wide aisles with coffee, was largely over. Walden Books. Before the book superstores, there were the mall bookstores, smaller, cozier, without the cathedral ambitions of Borders or Barnes & Noble, but present in nearly every American shopping mall for decades. Walden Books had a genuinely remarkable origin story. It started in 1933, during the Great Depression, as a book rental library. For 3 cents a day, you could borrow a book. When the rental model became less viable, Walden Books transitioned to retail and became, by the 1980s, the largest supplier of paperback books in the United States. The mall location format put books in front of Americans who might not have sought out a dedicated bookstore on their own. Walden Books was acquired by Borders in 1994, which seemed at the time like a smart consolidation of book retail. In retrospect, it meant that when Borders collapsed, Walden Books went with it. The 2011 liquidation ended both brands simultaneously. The 3 cents a day rental library that survived the Depression couldn't survive Amazon. There's something almost literary about that. CompUSA. In the 1990s, if you wanted a computer, or anything related to a computer, you went to CompUSA. The stores were enormous. Row after row of monitors displaying screensavers, towers stacked in columns, peripherals arranged by category, software titles filling entire walls. Walking into CompUSA in 1995 was walking into the physical manifestation of the digital future, and it was intoxicating if you were the kind of person who found technology intoxicating. At its peak, CompUSA had 229 locations and was the dominant specialty computer retailer in the country. The staff were genuinely knowledgeable. This was still an era when buying a computer required enough expertise that having someone explain it to you was valuable. The problem was that PC prices dropped faster than CompUSA's cost structure could accommodate. By the early 2000s, Walmart and Dell's direct sales model were selling computers cheaper than CompUSA could. The buy expertise that justified the specialty retailer premium became less necessary as computers became simpler and more standardized. CompUSA closed the majority of its stores in 2007 and sold its remaining locations. The building that had felt like the future in 1995 felt unnecessary. By 2005, technology had moved past the store that sold it. The Sharper Image. The Sharper Image catalog arrived in your mailbox, and you read it the way other people read science fiction, not because you were going to buy any of it, but because it was fun to imagine a world where you might. The store was the catalog made physical. Chrome surfaces, clean lines, products that served no urgent need but generated enormous desire. A $500 massage chair that you could sit in while mall walking. A personal hovercraft. Weather stations with more sensors than a small airport. And the Ionic Breeze, an air purifier that worked by generating ions rather than a filter, which sounded revolutionary and generated some of the most enthusiastic marketing copy in retail history. The Ionic Breeze was also the beginning of the end. Consumer Reports tested the device and found it ineffective at actually cleaning air, and in some configurations potentially harmful. Lawsuits followed. The Sharper Image's credibility as a purveyor of genuinely innovative technology was fatally damaged by a product that turned out to be mostly theater. Bankruptcy in 2008. The brand has been licensed and relaunched in various forms since, primarily online. But the store itself, the Chrome and Gadget Temple in the mall where you sat in the massage chair for 20 minutes with no intention of buying it, that's gone. It was one of the great retail experiences of its era, even if the Ionic Breeze didn't work. Kinney Shoes. For millions of American families, back-to-school shopping meant one mandatory stop: Kinney Shoes. Kinney had been selling affordable footwear since 1894, and by the post-war decades had built a network of stores that made it the go-to destination for family shoe shopping. Nothing fancy, nothing aspirational, just solid, reasonably priced shoes for everyone in the family, sold by staff who actually measured your foot before selling you anything. The irony of Kinney's eventual fate is that the company itself created its own replacement. In 1974, Kinney launched an athletic shoe subsidiary called Foot Locker, a specialty retailer focused entirely on athletic footwear. Foot Locker grew. The athletic shoe market exploded through the 1980s and 90s as sneaker culture transformed athletic footwear into a fashion category. The customers Kinney had served for generations migrated to the stores they were buying because of athletic brands, not because of Kinney. Kinney closed in 1998. Foot Locker, the subsidiary it had created, became one of the dominant shoe retailers in the world. The parent was outlasted by its child. Sears is not just a store, it is a chapter of American history. At its peak in the mid-20th century, Sears was the largest retailer in the world. The Wish Book, the Sears Christmas catalog, was the document by which American children organized their holiday desires. The Kenmore appliances and Craftsman tools sold under the Sears label were genuine quality benchmarks. You could famously order a house from the Sears catalog, a complete kit home delivered by railroad, assembled on your lot. Sears was not just where Americans shopped. For much of the 20th century, it was how Americans understood what consumer goods were available to them. The decline is a long story with many chapters, but the core of it is simple. Sears stopped evolving. Walmart built a supply chain efficiency that Sears couldn't match on price. Target built a shopping experience that Sears couldn't match on appeal. Amazon arrived and made the catalog model, the thing Sears had literally invented, obsolete. Sears had the brand equity and the customer loyalty to potentially compete with any of these threats, and it failed to mobilize either effectively. Bankruptcy in 2018. A handful of stores remain under technically the same corporate name. The Sears that defined American retail for a century is functionally gone. Venture stores. Outside the major coasts, Venture was the discount department store, the place where Midwestern families bought their everyday everything at prices that felt fair and in stores that felt, as the slogan promised, like you could save with style. The black and white diagonal stripe logo was the visual shorthand for a particular kind of Midwestern retail confidence. Not flashy, not cheap-looking, just solid and trustworthy. Venture stores were well-organized, reasonably well-staffed, and genuinely competitive on price without feeling like a warehouse. Overexpansion in the early 1990s was the undoing. Venture grew faster than its management infrastructure could support, opening new stores while the existing ones needed attention and investment. Walmart was simultaneously expanding into Venture's core Midwestern markets with a supply chain efficiency that Venture simply couldn't match. Financial collapse by 1998. The Midwest got Walmart instead, which offered lower prices and worse vibes in roughly equal measure. Venture's former customers mostly adjusted. The diagonal stripe logo disappeared from the landscape, mourned mainly by the people who grew up seeing it. Caldor called itself the Bloomingdale's of discounting, which tells you everything about the store's ambition and its market position. Founded in 1951 in Port Chester, New York, Caldor built a loyal following in the Northeast by doing something that sounded simple and proved difficult, selling quality merchandise at genuine discounts of 10 to 40% below retail. The stores were clean. The merchandise was carefully selected. The experience felt more upscale than Kmart without charging anything close to department. Store prices. At its peak, Caldor had over 150 locations and was a genuine regional powerhouse, the kind of store that inspired real loyalty in the communities where it operated. The retail wars of the 1990s were brutal for mid-tier discounters. Walmart's national expansion brought price competition that regional chains couldn't match. Kmart, fighting its own survival battle, was competing aggressively in the same markets. Caldor was caught between forces larger than itself, with financial resources that couldn't sustain the fight. Liquidation in 1999. The Northeast got Walmart and Target. The Bloomingdale's of discounting was gone. Kmart. The Blue Light Special, a flashing blue light mounted on a rolling cart pushed through the store to announce a time-limited discount in a specific aisle, was one of the great retail theater moments of the 20th century. When the blue light came on, you moved toward it. That was the deal. Kmart pioneered the discount department store model in 1962 and for decades was a genuine retail giant, the store that Walmart founder Sam Walton studied obsessively before building his own chain. Kmart had food sections and toy departments and clothing and hardware and automotive all under one roof at prices designed to pull customers away from traditional department stores. The irony is that Walmart learned its lessons from Kmart and then executed them better than Kmart ever did. While Kmart maintained comfortable stores and a mid-market positioning, Walmart relentlessly optimized supply chain, technology, and pricing. By the time Kmart recognized the threat, the gap had become unbridgeable. Bankruptcy in 2002, a merger with Sears in 2005 combined two struggling retailers into one struggling entity. A handful of Kmart stores still operate, making it technically alive, but the blue light hasn't meant anything for a long time. Gemco was the membership warehouse store before membership. Warehouse stores were a dominant format, a precursor to Costco and Sam's Club that never survived long enough to compete with them. Operating primarily in California and the Southwest, Gemco required a membership card to shop, a concept borrowed from industrial wholesale clubs and applied to a general merchandise retailer. Members got access to groceries, electronics, clothing, and one feature that felt genuinely futuristic: in-store childcare while you shopped. You dropped the kids off, did your shopping, picked them up on the way out. In 1980, that was remarkable. The problem was timing. When Target and Walmart began expanding aggressively into Gemco's markets, they offered the same merchandise without the membership fee. The barrier that Gemco had built around its model turned out to be a weakness. It gave customers a reason to go elsewhere that they didn't have with the membership stores. Gemco collapsed in 1986, its stores absorbed by Target. Costco, which launched the same year Gemco died, went on to prove that the membership model worked It just needed better execution and a more compelling value proposition. Gemco was early. It wasn't quite right. Western Auto. Western Auto was the store that happened when someone decided that auto parts, bicycles, and kitchen appliances belonged under the same roof, and turned out to be correct. Founded in 1909 in Kansas City, Western Auto was a hybrid retailer that defied easy categorization. You could buy a carburetor, a Schwinn bicycle, a lawnmower, and a refrigerator all in the same trip. The combination sounds random, but reflected a genuine understanding of what hardware store and auto parts customers actually needed. Practical goods for the home and the vehicle in one place at reasonable prices. At its peak, Western Auto had thousands of locations across the country, many of them independently owned franchises operating under the Western Auto name. It was a genuine community institution in small-town and suburban America. Sears acquired Western Auto in 1988 and spent the following decade gradually consolidating and rebranding the operations. The Western Auto name faded as locations were converted to other formats. The auto parts business eventually became part of what is now Advance Auto Parts. The specific combination, auto parts next to bikes next to appliances, disappeared from the American retail landscape. The customers it served scattered to the specialized retailers that replaced it. Eckerd Drugs. Before CVS and Walgreens consolidated the American pharmacy market into a two-horse race, Eckerd was one of the major players. And in the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic, it was often the dominant one. Founded in 1898 in Erie, Pennsylvania, and expanded aggressively through the Sun Belt in the post-war decades, Eckerd built its modern identity on two things: neighborhood pharmacy service and film developing. The photo counter, where you dropped off your rolls of film and returned 2 days later for your prints, was a genuine differentiator in the pre-digital era. Eckerd processed millions of rolls of American film, capturing birthday parties and vacations and ordinary Tuesdays. The digital camera made the photo counter obsolete almost instantly. The pharmacy consolidation wars of the 1990s and 2000s forced every regional chain to either grow aggressively or be absorbed. Eckerd couldn't grow fast enough. J.C. Penney acquired Eckerd in 2004 and then sold the pharmacy operations to Jean Coutu Group, which subsequently sold them to Rite Aid. The Eckerd name was retired. The neighborhood pharmacy that had developed your film and filled your prescriptions for a century became a Rite Aid, and then, in many markets, a Walgreens. Egghead Software. The name was self-aware. The mascot, a bespectacled, egg-shaped professor, was self-aware. Egghead Software knew exactly who its customer was, the person who actually read the manual. Founded in 1984 in Bellevue, Washington, Egghead was the software boutique of the early PC era, the store where you bought your word processors, your spreadsheet programs, your utilities and games, all on floppy disks in cardboard boxes with printed documentation that sometimes ran to hundreds of pages. In the mid-1980s, software was a physical product with physical retail, and Egghead was one of its primary destinations. At its peak, Egghead had over 200 locations and was the dominant specialty software retailer in the country. The staff were knowledgeable. The selection was deep. For the emerging class of American computer users who needed software and wanted guidance, Egghead was essential. The internet made software distribution a delivery problem rather than a retail problem, and Egghead had no answer for that. By the late 1990s, the stores were closing rapidly. Egghead pivoted to e-commerce, selling refurbished electronics and software online, but couldn't find profitability in the new model. The final chapter is the most memorable. Egghead sold its domain name to Amazon, which used it briefly for a liquidation sales site. The store that had competed with the future ended by selling its address to the future for whatever the future was willing to pay.